Welcome, everyone, to Studio Soundtracks, the monthly program that takes listeners behind the scenes of making music for film and television. I'm your host, Chandler Poling. For today's program, I've invited two incredible artists that act as both recording artists as well as composers. Welcome to the show, Dustin O'Halloran and Amelia Warner. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So for those of you who don't know, Dustin is an Oscar, BAFTA, Golden Globe nominated composer known for his work on Lion, Like Crazy, and Marie Antoinette. He won a Primetime Emmy for his nostalgic theme to Transparent, and his recent work on Ammonite, co-composed with Volker Bertelmann, has just been released by Neon. And winner of Breakthrough Composer of the Year with the IFMCA Awards and nominee of Discovery of the Year from the World Soundtrack Academy, Amelia Warner is nothing short of a bright new force within the film music industry. Her work on the 2018 film Mary Shelley earned her critical praise, followed by her recent work in Wild Mountain Thyme, which has been quoted in the media as among the best scores of the year. Now, on this show, occasionally, I invite composers who don't know each other and some that do, but you actually have met before, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Can you share a story?
Well, the way that we met, we were actually, you were with me, Chandler. We were in London for the BAFTAs for Lion.
That wasn't me. That was Thomas.
Oh, that's right. It was a blur.
It was.
And we were there was a bit of a pre-party before the event, and I was ordering some champagne at the bar, and I turned around and immediately spilled it all over the guy behind me, which turned out to be Amelia's husband, Jamie. And then I realized that he was presenting, and I it was one of those moments where I just felt horrible. And then then I met Amelia, but she was really nice to me, and I think moved it out.
It was so funny because I love your music, and I was a big fan of yours before then, and then I loved Lion, and I loved the score to that, and then I just like turned around and saw Jamie in this like really intense kind of conversation with you, and I was like, what? How has this happened? What's gone on? And yeah, then he covered in champagne.
Yeah.
I think that's what they officially call a champagne problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. And then you guys, have you stayed in touch since your champagne moment, or how have you been able to collaborate at all, or how have you guys known each other since?
We've stayed in touch. Me and Jamie went around for dinner. An amazing, Dustin's an amazing cook. And so we had a really, really nice meal when we were in LA, and then we have we've kind of bumped into each other a few times at studios, and we have babies who are similar age, so we kind of have sent pictures, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I picked you two, obviously, not because you know each other, but because you have very interesting kind of parallel careers, both as recording artists and film composers. You both use the piano a lot in your work. So I'm excited to kind of have a little discussion. So you both work in music now, obviously, but it didn't start out that way. Dustin, I saw that you were an art student, and Amelia, you were involved in acting. So what is it about music that made you change gears and find your path to becoming composers?
Well, realizing that you're not a great artist, and then realizing that piano just comes more naturally. That was sort of an easy move for me. But I started in a band, so yeah, and then so slowly found my way into working on my own music.
It was similar for me, and I kind of realized that I wasn't a great actress, and that I didn't, really enjoy acting very much. And then music was just something that I'd kind of always done, and was just a huge part of my life. But because I hadn't kind of been didn't go down the classical training route, I just never really thought that there was any kind of option of it being something I could do for a career. So, but it was always the thing that I loved. And if anyone ever asked what I loved, it was always music. But it just took me a while to, experiment with actually doing it as a job.
Yeah. And I think listeners are very grateful that you both did not like what you were doing before and now are writing music because you have a lot of fans that appreciate what you do. But on the topic, you were both recording albums and EPs early on, whether you were in bands or doing it solo, and eventually fell into the film composing world. What about writing music to picture is the most exciting thing to you, and what is the most daunting?
Well, I think for me, the most exciting thing is probably just the collaboration of it, because I think sometimes when you're composing and writing your own music, you can be in a bit of an echo chamber, or you can kind of be in your own space, and it can be quite solitary. And there are elements of that I love as well, but sometimes it's really, really nice to be part of a bigger picture and a bigger team, and be kind of sharing ideas and being influenced by people, and just being part of a big story and having your role within that. And I kind of really, I feel one of the things that I find frustrating, I guess, are just the boundaries, and the fact that, often, especially if the pitch is locked, you're coming into something and it's like it requires 33 seconds of music here, and there's no flexibility, or there's rarely flexibility. It's very rigid, the way that you're writing music, which can be really frustrating. But I actually also get a lot from that. I really enjoy those boundaries. I enjoy kind of trying to make something fit, and it feels like a puzzle to me that you have to kind of work out, and you have to kind of weave all these layers and create all these little pieces, and it all just has to fit. And I enjoy that a lot. But there is something wonderful about the freedom of just writing your own music, and the kind of self-discovery that comes with that.
Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of the same. I think it. I was doing a lot of my own music and had been in a band for a long time. So coming into film was sort of a new. When I started, I was sort of doing what I do, and that's sort of why people were asking me to work on their films. But then, as I've gotten deeper into it, I realized it's a different path, and there's a lot of it's a much more collaborative work, and I enjoy that as well. I think I really love both, and I try to do both, which gets challenging at the time. But when you have a story and you have a time that you have to finish it, it really puts a fire under you, and it's interesting what you can pull out in a short amount of time. And when you're working on your own music, it's a longer process. It takes time, and maybe you're not always feeling it that day. So I really like both. I mean, I'm finding I've just sort of returned to working on my own music again, and I'm finding that I had to kind of it's taking me longer to sort of undo that feeling of having to get things done, and realize that I need to give it more time and more space, and that it comes out the way it should. So yeah.
At the top of the show, we heard the Oscar-nominated theme from Lion that you co-composed with Volker Bittelman. Dustin, how's your life changed since that incredible score came out?
I don't. I guess it started to pull me more into the film world, where before I wasn't. I was doing a bit of film, but it wasn't that busy. It wasn't sort of back to back, and then that sort of started this film after film. So it was quite busy after that, and it's. I always think getting into film composing is a learning curve, especially if you love music, because it's not always about making music. I mean, half of the work is being a therapist for the director, being learning how to be collaborative and put your ego aside, and there's a lot of other things to it. So I mean, I've just been learning a lot since then.
I really want to hear some of Amelia's music, so I am going to play a piece called Welcome to Ireland from her recent released OST from While the Mountain Time. Here is Welcome to Ireland. Amelia, I really think that is a really beautiful piece. It's hard to believe it's only your third film score in your career. It just channels really classic romantic sweeping themes and feelings, and I really enjoy it. How did you study and prepare for this score?
I it was to be honest, I just read the script and I had just a really strong response to it, and kind of instantly had a couple of themes straight away just from the script. And to be honest, it was one of those things that was, I guess, percolating and bubbling away in some way in the background the whole time. And so I think when I came to actually doing it, I'd kind of done a lot of the work already in my mind, and I kind of knew that I wanted it how I wanted it to sound, and I felt that it needed to have very strong melodic themes, and so that I kind of approached it by just trying to get those themes and those melodies and those kind of hooks and those classic thematic motifs. So once I kind of had them, then I felt like it was just a question of kind of weaving it all together. And then the other side to it, I guess, was the more folk, kind of the more traditional, the more trad music side of the score as well. So with that, I mean, I just did I love Irish trad music. I listen to it anyway, but I just kind of, listened to lots and lots of it, and tried to understand it a bit more.
It really comes across that you put a lot of effort and study into this score, because like I said, it's incredible to think it's your third film score, and it just sounds so amazing. I've been listening to it actually frequently while I'm working. It gives me a lot of kind of joy and also a little bit of rest too, because there's moments of levity and moments of peace, and I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to explore each of your solo work for a bit, but focusing on writing for music for film first. What is the thing that, when asked to score a feature, do you read the script, or do you want to go to the piano, or do you want to see a locked cut? What do you want as an artist when kind of being approached about a film? What's your most ideal scenario?
I love writing music to the script. It's my favorite. Before you've seen anything and you're just using your imagination and putting yourself into it, that's always my favorite. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think sometimes picture just wants something that it wants, and it's hard to fight that. But it's always my favorite, just to get the script and to think about it and to have time. And sit at the piano. Even if it's not going to be a piano score, it's always a really nice place to start. Just no computer.
Amelia, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I love writing from the script, and I definitely with Mary Shelley and with all three actually, I read the script, and that was my first, before seeing any picture, and wrote music before seeing picture. But like Dustin said, I've found that often it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work to the picture, and like the film does kind of tell you what it needs. And there are times that I've been really attached to something that I've written, and I've just been trying desperately to make it work, and it just doesn't. And so there's that point where you realize you have to let things go, which can be quite hard, especially if you've had a really strong reaction to the script and you've written something that you feel is right. But ultimately, when you see the picture and you see all the pieces together, and the I do like locked picture, because then you kind of can where the dialogue is, where you need to sit, where you need to kind of put the music around, and I like having all of that information. But I think for kind of creatively, I definitely prefer writing straight away to even just to what the idea of the story is, and in a kind of sense getting some themes or some palettes or some ideas, but not being too attached to them.
Dustin, can you talk to us about crafting the piece Fossils for Ammonite? It's very delicate and simple and very touching, and I just wanted to know kind of your approach to that piece in particular.
Well, it's a little bit what we talked about. When Francis, we actually didn't get the script. We actually got a first cut of the film. But I felt, even though we had a cut of the film, I just felt that it was the sort of film that I should just put it away and just write music and just see, we talked a lot about the feelings of the film and what he was looking for. And he was the first idea was to write one piece of music that could play in fragments throughout the film and come together in the end. And we did that a little bit. We ended up having to diverge because just some scenes just wouldn't work with that. I mean, he wanted to create a very minimalistic score in that sense. And so I actually, both Volker and I just wrote a lot of music just not to picture. And I was just trying to write a piece of music, but keeping the film in mind and keeping the feeling of the film in mind. And it's not a picture that needs anything really hitting mark in the frame. So there was a lot of freedom to just write music. So it was just sitting at the piano and just thinking about it. But the film was a slow process, even though there's very little music in the film. Francis really took his time, and there was a lot of talk. And I've never talked about things so much for such a short score, but it was so nice. We never felt rushed. And there was so much space, and in the end, it was the first time I really felt that.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's hear Fossils from Ammonite. That is such a lovely piece. I always enjoy listening to it. Thank you so much for sharing that. You both use the piano professionally, but if you were not to play the piano, what instrument would you yearn to play next?
Well, I've always wanted to learn to play the cello. I feel like that would be an attainable goal, because if I could play 4 notes, I'd probably be pretty satisfied.
Amelia?
Yeah, no, it would be the same, actually. It would be the cello, because it's just such a beautiful instrument, and I've always kind of loved using it. And it feels, well, no, I mean, I don't think I could learn it, but I would love to.
I've always wanted to learn the French horn. I tried taking lessons, but I just love the sound of it.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that is it's a beautiful horn. But the tuning of it is complicated, because you have to put your hand inside the horn. And that's when I found that that was the moment that I realized that's it. It's a hard, and the sound is going behind you.
Yeah.
Essentially. So.
Yeah, they're specifically designed to be out of tune, and your hand is what makes it in tune.
Yeah.
Amelia, what brought about the decision to record under the name Slow Moving Millie and then later change to just Amelia Warner?
Do you know what? I mean, that was kind of, I was thinking about this recently, and I thought, why did you do that? And I think it's because, well, the name came from, I was an actress for about 5 or 6 years, and then I really just didn't know what I wanted to do, even though the whole time I was making music. And so I'd be in between takes, I'd be in my trailer with my keyboard and I had Logic, and I would be making things in between, whenever I had time. And eventually I remember saying to a friend, like, I think maybe I should do something with music. And she just called me, Slow Moving Millie, as in how slow I was, that I was the last person to realize that's what I should be doing, and that was what my passion was. And it took me the longest to figure it out of all of my friends and family. So that's where the kind of nickname came from. And then I think I did that because at the time I was writing songs and performing a bit, which I really, really struggled with. And I was really shy, and I really battled kind of, being very, very nervous for performances and really struggling to sing in public. And I just found it quite traumatic. And so I think I almost gave myself this name because it felt like a separate thing to me. And I could it felt like a different identity. And in some way I felt like it was separate, and it maybe just helped a little bit for that side of things and performing. But I was thinking about it recently, and I think why I did that when I look back is actually because it didn't really identify with being a singer or songwriter. That wasn't it. It didn't feel like me. because the music I was making mainly was just piano music, was like instrumental piano music. But I didn't know what to do with that, and I didn't feel like there was a place for it at the time. And so I kind of wrote songs because that felt like what you do. But I think the Slow Moving Millie thing was about me not feeling comfortable with doing that.
Well, I want to play some of the tracks, not from Slow Moving Millie, but from your EPs under Amelia Warner. These are two tracks from your latest EP titled Haven. We're going to start with a track called We Came Home. Amelia, what made you select this piece, as well as I'm going to play For Love after this? What about these two pieces from your EP really stand out, and how was this different from your other work?
I think I like these pieces because, well, I like Full Love I picked because I think it's got a slightly different feel to anything I've done on previously on the other EPs, because it's kind of more euphoric and joyful and celebratory, and I really enjoyed writing music, and I guess that's probably a follow-on to what happened with my Wild Mountain Time, writing music that felt just more joyful and more uplifting, whereas my previous work I think had been more just a bit more melancholy and a bit more kind of delicate, I suppose. So it was really fun just being a bit bigger with everything. And with Haven, with that EP, it was all piano and horns and brass. I didn't use any strings. We just had this amazing brass section, and I found that really joyful, and I really enjoyed writing for brass. So it was kind of it was a different thing. And then the EP itself, when we recorded it, I just had a baby, and so I couldn't really get to a studio, and was finding it really difficult to find a date to be able to go and leave her or bring her, or it was all getting complicated. And so I recorded it at home, and we recorded in those tracks, We Came Home, there's like bird song, and there's the fire, and there's like, we recorded all the sounds of my house, and I played the piano in my living room, and it was just a really lovely. So I feel like in some ways that EP sounds like home, and that's why We Came Home is the one I picked.
I love that. Well, let's stay on this vibe, and we'll hear another track from Haven. This one is titled For Love. Beautiful. Now, Dustin, you've released 4 solo albums and 2 EPs to date, not to mention the work with your bands. Is it Devix? The Devix?
Devix and A Winged Victory for the solo.
Yes. So now what's next for you? Are you going to start up an Icelandic vocal record, or what's new?
Probably, most likely. Well, I just finished a record, which will be my first full length on Deutsche Grammophon. And I'm going to keep it a little bit of a surprise what it is, I think. But I ended up recording a lot of piano here in Iceland, and it wasn't the plan to record here, but we ended up here. And so I ended up recording in different churches and different spaces here in Iceland, which actually was really wonderful. And kind of a happy mistake, not a mistake, but just didn't really realize I would be doing it here. So yeah, so just finishing that.
Can't wait to hear it. You brought us a piece that I absolutely love. We Move Lightly. It's I think it's so beautiful, and it appears on your album Lumiere. It appears in the film Like Crazy, and even a Nike ad. Did you think a single piece of music like that would just have such a life already?
No, not at all. When I recorded the piano in Italy, it was right before I moved to Berlin. And then I ended up moving to Berlin and recorded the violin with another composer, Peter Broderick. He's a really lovely guy. And yeah, it's just one of those strange things that just sort of works and had a life of its own, and I never really expected it.
Well, let's slip into the sounds of We Move Lightly so everyone can hear how beautiful it is. Now, what do you wish you knew in the past that you now know in the present?
Well, I would say for me, it would be, it's okay if you don't have, all of this classical training. It's okay if you can't, read music, write music. It's okay if you can't conduct. It's okay if you can't use, various programs. And because all of those things held me back for so long, because I just thought, well, you have to be able to do that. And I thought that just being able to kind of compose a melody or or a piece of music wasn't enough, and in truth there is a truth to that, but I think you can find people who can do those things and can support you and help you, and that's fine. You don't have to be really good at every single piece of this. I feel like you have to find your strengths and really kind of lean into them, and then get help, get support for the things that you struggle with. And I have an amazing orchestrator that I work with who is, he can do some of those things that I can't, and that's okay. And I think it took me a while to really understand that.
Dustin, what about you?
Actually, those are wise words, and I think I didn't come from an academic background either, so I've learned just by doing things and finding people that are better than me at doing other things. But I think that I'm sort of grateful for the slow path that I took, because I think that it brought me a lot of confidence to understand who I am as a writer. And I think that I always wished that I had more training, but I've sort of made peace with that and found that my limitations can be an asset. So I think that earlier in my career, I think I felt more that I was lacking this fundamental training as a pianist. And I think even my first record, I didn't actually want to release it because I just felt like that it was too naive and the playing wasn't good enough. And you can't really, a piano is a very revealing instrument. You can only do what you can do. And I think I've found that simplicity in the way that I work is okay. And it can be beautiful as well.
Well, I believe that behind every great mind is an incredible team. And Amelia, you mentioned an orchestrator, and Dustin, I'm sure. What's one person behind the scenes that you just want to give a little shout out to? Just to give them shine a little light on somebody that's helped you in your career.
Well, for me, it would definitely be my the orchestrator that I've worked with on Mary Shelley. And I worked with him on Wild Mountain Time, and he did my last EP, Haven, and he produced it as well. He's called Nathan Klein, and he's just brilliant and genius and has the most incredible academic background and classical music mind. And but we're a really good team. I think we work really well together.
And for me, it would have to be Francesco Donadello, who I met in Italy, and he's an engineer, sound recordist, a musician, and we've done every film and everything that I've done on my own, he's been a part of, and he's just such a master of his craft, and he's one of my best friends, and I've learned so much from him. And he ended up moving to Berlin when I moved to Berlin, and he worked a lot with Johann Johansson on his scores, and he worked with Hildur Gudnadottir, and he's always growing, and he's an experimenter with sound. And so he's been probably my closest confidant and collaborator during my whole career.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that we can talk about the people that help us. I mean, I constantly try to bring up our team at our company, Adriana and Andrew. They're so wonderful. So I think whenever you can, just give a shout out to those that are helping you be the best you can be. We have a few minutes left, so I want to just pause, listen to another piece of Dustin's before I ask you your final question. So here is a piece called An Ending, a Beginning. Dustin, what is it about that piece? Like, why is that one you think so popular? I noticed it had like so many listens on Spotify and everything. Like,
I honestly, I have no idea. When I'm writing music, I never know what people will gravitate to. And I remember I recorded that on a really, I remember recording the piano. It was really just like off the cuff in Los Angeles. And then I ended up recording the strings in Berlin. And if I remember, it was it was for a film, and they didn't use it. It was rejected. And that, and that's the nice thing about when you're writing music and you're not working a picture. And if you write a good piece of music, you can always keep it for yourself. And so I ended up keeping that for myself.
I love that. I'm sure there's lots of situations where a composer's written an amazing piece of music for a film or television project, and it just ends up on the cutting room floor, and none of us get to listen to it. So I'm glad that you were able to salvage and release it to the world. And I want to hear all of Amelia's cuttings as well. Anything that doesn't make it, I think we need to have the reject album and see how that comes about.
I don't know about that.
Now, my last question I love to ask every episode or every studio soundtracks is, what was the first album you purchased and what was the last thing you listened to?
God, if you don't know.
Well, my brother growing up he listened to a lot of heavy metal, and it was oppressive. And when when I was 13, I moved in with my dad, and I remember the first thing I did was went to the record store and bought a Cure record.
I love it. I love The Cure. And what would you say the last thing you listened to? I know we recently had this conversation where you don't listen to music much anymore, so it doesn't have to be music.
Well, actually, I've been there's a great record store here in Reykjavik called 12 Tonar. And I'm a big fan of supporting record stores. And so I've been going in there, and I've been getting really into 60s era jazz. I've been listening to a lot of Miles Davis, and I actually started a little chess night there. We're doing playing chess and listening to a little Miles. So yeah, last night we were listening to Birth of the Cool. And that's a beautiful record.
Nice. Amelia, what about you?
So I believe that the first record I bought was the Immaculate Collection, Madonna.
Brilliant.
And I mean, it's just amazing still. And actually my little girls have just kind of discovered it recently, and so it's really fun to be listening to that again. And then I've probably been listening to, it's a lot of Christmas music for me at the moment because of it's December, so love Christmas. I'm a Christmas person, so there's been like just lots of Bing Crosby and lots of Christmassy festive cheer.
Lovely. Yeah, I guess that brings the question, are we more classic Christmas listeners or more pop Christmas listeners? For me, it's a mix of both, but I love the classics.
Oh yeah, it's a mix, but you've got to throw in like a bit of Mariah, you've got to throw in a bit of that with the classics, I think.
Yeah, I love the Bing Christmas. Feels, I always feel that.
Elvis Christmas is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me here on Studio Soundtracks, only on Dublab Radio. Our outro music I'll be playing for you is another track from Amelia's work on Wild Mountain Thyme called The Phone Call. So I want to thank you both very much for joining me on this show. Everybody who's listening, go out and see Ammonite and Wild Mountain Thyme. And I really appreciate you, Dustin and Amelia, for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Chanda.